Talk to Vlad.
Talk to Vlad.
Talk to Vlad. Talk to Vlad.
Talk to Vlad. Or secrets they will never tell. Hello, my dear friends, and welcome back to Talk to Vlad, or Secrets They Will Never Tell. And today's episode is first of its kind, where I have a guest in my studio. Please meet and greet Fierce Sophie. Episode title: White Woman Gets Her Art Judged. Sophie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Sophie, for those of you that don't know. I'm from the UK. I have been friends with Vlad for
3 years?
3
3 years indeed.
Motherfucker. That's a long time.
That's a long time
3
indeed.
years.
And so having Sophie as a friend, I got to listen to her stories.
Sometimes against your own will.
Sometimes against my own will, but it led to a point where I decided to invite Sophie so she could tell one of her stories. So Sophie, regardless of where we now, there is an interesting encounters in your past, and one of the encounters I would like to highlight today is your travels to Baltimore.
Yeah, okay. So it's a long story how I ended up in Baltimore, of all places in the world. I guess to start at the very, very beginning of it.
How old were you?
God, 2016. So I was redacted as an age because I'm too old now. I'm not sharing that. But you can figure it
Right
out.
on.
I was at uni,
So it's been like 8 years ago.
I suppose. God, that's terrifying. Yeah, 8 years ago. Okay, so for context, I was studying at university and I was studying fine art. When I did my interview for the university, I came with like my big portfolio and all of my cool stuff that I was like, this is wicked, this is amazing, they're gonna love this, I'm so talented. And I go in and the guy's like, this is not art. I was like, oh, fuck, ow, my feelings, okay? I was like showing him like works that I'd spent months on and he was like, yeah, this isn't art, this is images. You need to contextualize your practice. There's nothing behind it. It's like looking at a wall. It's boring. And I was like, okay, my feelings are hurt, but can I still come to the university? And he was like, yeah, okay, fine. I'll see you in September. So I went and I was I was thinking for a really long time because I take everything personal. So when he said, your work is shit, I really took that to heart. I was rolling it around in my head what he meant, like this idea of contextualizing your practice, because that was the basis of what our degree was about at the time. Couldn't for the life of me figure it out until like my second or third day, when I saw other people talking about their art and they had this whole big story and this big narrative. But like in art school, like I kid you not, I was terrified to touch anything for the first 2 months because I'd see like a piece of string on the floor and I'd be like, shit, is that somebody's art project or is it trash or what are we doing here? Like, can we clean it up? So yeah, like this was kind of, obviously we were all really young. And so our idea of contextualizing our practice, which I see nowadays in a lot of art, is this kind of very spoon-fed, over-explained pieces. Like there'd be a piece of panties stapled, like a pair of panties stapled to a wall.
Banana taped to a wall.
Exactly, and then an essay next to it explaining why it was there. And I'm like, well, if it's good art, surely it should be able to speak for itself. And at the same time, so I had a flatmate who was this brilliant, she was this phenomenal liar. Like she was like this artist of bullshitting. Like she just got like to the point that like I think she thought it was true sometimes, some of the stuff that she was saying. And it was like this amazing art form that she had of being able to kind of spin this story of complete and utter shit. And so I adored her from the moment that we met. I was like, I'm gonna follow you around. You understand something I don't. All of her work was she was much smarter than I am and probably will ever be. But she had this idea about sort of politics and art. And her fascination was in kind of contextualizing the political art. And I know that sounds like a very long-winded way of saying a very short thing, but I mean more to the point of contextualizing yourself and your personality, much like the essay on the wall next to the banana, but with a politician, let's say.
Right.
So,
just to remind, Talk to Vlad is strictly apolitical.
But let me just continue to talk about politics. So this is like completely outside of the realms of a belief system. But what was happening at the time is that we had this emergence of a combination of things called nudge, which, if you don't know, was kind of perpetrated by Cambridge Analytica, where they data mined a bunch of information allegedly off Facebook and then allegedly use that information to target people. So say, for example, you see an ad on Facebook, and I'm getting to how I ended up in Baltimore, but this is just the context behind it. Let's say you see an ad on Facebook. It says, do you like seeing ads? If you interact with that, they already put you into a category of people that is going to interact with things they see online. Perfect. Amazing. A gold mine. Because then they look at what you're looking at and why you're looking at things, how long you're looking at things, and they start to kind of gently suggest. The way that they did this was through sort of pissing you off, I think is the easiest way to put it. The more annoyed you got, the more likely you were to interact. And so Cambridge Analytica allegedly funneled all of this energy and all of this data mining into getting people to interact with ads, and then used that to kind of sway elections, allegedly. But we saw who was president. Not that it's political, but we saw what happened, right? Anyway, this was all going down at the same time that we were studying art. And there is this beautiful intrinsic art that comes with suggesting somebody to your point of view. When you look at a painting in a gallery, it makes you feel a certain way. And that reaction without the body of text accompanying it should be a natural thing. You know, I shouldn't have to read the information to be able to understand what the piece is about and feel something. And this was very much along that line. So
I agree with you.
I don't need to study anything here.
Because for me, art is more how you personally reflect to that and to someone's point of view when the artist create the artwork. This is like, you know, their beliefs behind it, their political view behind it. There's like, you know, life situation or this particular moment that they were going through. And this is about you, how you reflect to that. And, you know, I don't need to read an essay, as you say, like that is attached on the wall right next to it, just like to try to see how am I reflecting, that it's have to happen naturally.
Exactly. It has to evoke an emotion.
Exactly.
And that's what they were doing, is they were evoking emotions in people in order to push a particular ideology or agenda. It was very, very smart, very, very morbid, but also like you can't take away like the impact that it had, and therefore it must have been intelligent in some way. Anyway, she was looking greatly into this, and we saw that a lot with the campaign that we were on, because, or at least it appeared that way. You know, it seemed like America was kind of being split onto these kind of two opposing sides, and those sides were clashing with each other. And we were fascinated by it because it was like watching media as a spectacle in real time. So we'd watch the debates, we'd watch the Republican debates, we'd watch the Democratic debates, and then eventually we started watching the debates like with both sides. And then when it was down to the two final candidates, we had a preference. I won't say who. Hillary Clinton. We fell in love with her as, think what you want about her, that's completely fine. Nor am I going to argue that she was the most perfect, upstanding citizen, but they're politicians. Find me one that is. However, she was fascinating because she'd come through scandal after the Benghazi hearing, 16 hours in a room, infallible. This woman's impeccable, always dressed the part, always knew what she did. Terrible at campaigning, not her fault. Amazing when she was in positions like Secretary of State, phenomenal. Campaigning, not her. You know what, you can't have everything. You can be smart and beautiful and you can be bad at one thing, it's fine. We kind of developed this fixation or this fascination with her as a person, and we really were determined to go and see not just her become the president, but the first female president was going to be this, it's like a moment in history, and you get to be there for a moment of history, and no matter what you think of her as a person or as a politician or whatever, it was still like this capsule in time that was ever going to be remembered. And to say that you were there insane. So we'd booked flights in June. The results came in. We were sat, like we were in bed. We had food, we had champagne, we had many other things. And we were in heaven. Like, you know, states were turning blue. We were seeing it like on the screen. We had CNN on one screen. We had Fox News on another screen. We had like the poll in front of us. Like we had everything bombarded from every side. And bear in mind, it was on US time, so it must have been 2:00 in the morning. So we had these reheated vegan cheese toasties. Like we were living the life. Then the states started turning red. And more states started turning red, and more states started turning red, and we were like, this can't, like, we were like holding on to this one state. We were like, Illinois for sure, Illinois is gonna swing it, like we're gonna be fine. Eventually, bottle of champagne left unopened, sort of dripping water down the windowsill, food left uneaten, just kind of curled up, wrapped in the blanket, being like, oh my God, what is happening? Like darkest timeline shit. And so, because we had these flights to Washington, just take everything in. I remember seeing the newspaper that morning, and the very front page was Hillary Clinton, and it just said "phew" in big, because obviously the tabloids didn't know how it was going to go. And so we're on the bus, the 43 bus in Manchester, and the tabloid just said "phew" with Hillary Clinton's face, and you turned over the page, and it was Donald Trump's face, and it was, oh shit. And I was like, well, we won't be needing this page now, will we? And so we had these flights, and we were like, okay, let's go on a sort of Hillary Clinton pilgrimage instead. And so we flew to Chicago. In Chicago, like amazing city, lovely people, like the most I remember being in like a subway at 4 a.m. and getting extra cookies because they had them. Like they were the nicest people you could meet. Like we got picked up by a couple of guys that we met. They drove us all around the city. They took us out to the lake. They took pictures of us like standing in front of the skyline. Like they really spoil us. Bear in mind, these were complete strangers. So we got into a car with two complete strangers and didn't die, which is
success.
you could
call it a success.
It was a win.
Thanks, feminism.
Then after a few days in Chicago, we were gonna go and see the sights in Washington. We ended up going to the Women's March in Chicago, and that was amazing. Like we went outside of our hotel. There was a woman with like a bucket and a mop, and she was like, come on girls, let's clean up the streets. And we were like, we're coming wherever you're going. And then anyway, so we finished our time in Chicago. We were gonna go, because we were flying out of Washington, because it was cheaper just to fly back with direct flights as opposed to flying, you know, the whole thing. But we landed in Baltimore. It's like another planet. Like I've been all over the world to so many countries, and nowhere did I feel as alien as I did when we were in Baltimore. Bear in mind, Baltimore is the place of the fentanyl epidemic because of the whole opioid situation where they were overprescribing opioid medication to people, and then they cut them off cold, and so everyone moved to fentanyl. It's on Netflix, you'll see. So we were there, we landed, and we had, like, our suitcase had broken. So we were carrying it, like, 2 by 2. Amalia had this big camera around her neck, like Nikon, like expensive stuff. And we walked like this out into Baltimore, just girls being girls. Yeah, it slapped us pretty hard in the face. Like a woman comes up to us, we were lost, we were trying to find a hotel. This woman comes up to us, you're not from around here. And we're like, how can you tell? You know, just like with the fucking bag and the camera and all this shit. And she was like, listen, I'm gonna take you to the black bus stop because the white bus stop, they're all on crack and they will mug you. And we were like, okay.
A black bus stop and a white bus stop.
It was like, yeah, I mean, I can't speak for it because I don't know, but it was different for sure.
And the lady suggested that you go to the black bus stop because it's much safer. Because the white bus stop is full of junkies, and she was afraid that you're gonna get mugged.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much.
I mean,
very nice. Makes sense.
Why wouldn't it? We're in Baltimore.
Totally. Welcome to Baltimore.
Yeah.
Enjoy your stay. So what did you do? You went to the black bus stop?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, right.
Like, if somebody comes up to you on the street and gives you advice like that, you listen.
Absolutely.
So we end up on this bus. Obviously, the bus stops at all the bus stops, so kind of redundant, but whatever, it was a sweet gesture. And we finally get our way to the hotel, and we like knock on the door because the door doesn't open, and we hear like and we're like, okay, I guess it's safe.
Sound of safety.
And this man like creeps behind the door like you ever seen the Rocky Horror Show? You know, Richard O'Brien, like with the white wig, and he's like kind of comes around the door and he's like, "Come in, children." And we're like, "Oh my god, is this like Hansel and Gretel? Are we gonna get, you know, cooked and eaten?" And he takes us up to our hotel room, which looks like this sort of Victorian dollhouse, like everything, like
It does sound
canopy
creepy.
on the bed, like, you know, the window like against the wind, you know, everything carpeted, the walls carpeted, the floor carpeted, everything kind of red.
And
It was-
soundproof.
Yeah, it was kind of like The Shining, but it was a beautiful hotel, lovely stay.
Indeed.
Five stars on TripAdvisor.
It does sound like that.
Listen, it worked. It was what we needed, and we had absolutely zero frame of reference for fear. So, you know, that's called being young and stupid, I guess. And we go in there and we get into the room, and the Bible is placed like just so on the bed, like there you go. We go to the McDonald's, we go to the supermarket to go and get some. Oh, one thing that did happen. We go and like the street's full of people everywhere. But I would say we were the only white people on the street at that time until we left the McDonald's. And then the streets were completely empty. The entire street is filled with cop cars. And all the cops obviously are white, and we're like, shit, we don't want to be associated with you guys. Like, they're all like smiling at us like, hey, how's your day? And we're like, no, we're not with you. Like, that's not how this goes. This guy comes over, he starts talking to us. He's like, oh, come, meet my friends. Like, we'll have a party, this sort of thing. We're like, no, thank you, we're fine. We're just gonna head back to the hotel, nothing personal, just we have our own plans. We have an episode of American Dad lined up. We leave out of a different exit of the supermarket, and there's like 15 guys waiting at the original exit, just standing there, ready. And we were like, you know what?
Ooh.
Lucky. Always fucking lucky. Like, every single situation me and this girl were in, we missed the most dangerous scenario by like...
Do you think they were waiting for you?
Yeah, it would just, you know, when the air smells weird. And then we came out the back of the supermarket, went round, and this guy pulls up in his car. Like, there was so many signs to just go inside in Baltimore. Like, I'm sure it's a perfectly safe place to live if you're from there. But if you're not from there, you really stick out. And this guy like pulls up in his car, and he's white, but he's got two people like with the tourniquet on in the back, like sleeping.
Oh shit.
And he calls me over. And obviously, I go over there because I'm fucking genius.
Sure.
Smartest girl on the planet here.
Hey, handsome.
Hey, darling, how's it going? And I go up to him, he's like, listen, I'm going to tell you because you're my kind. And I was like, don't love that. I was like, you need to go inside. And we were like, you know what? 3 people in like an hour, that's enough for us. We're gonna, you know what? We're gonna mosey. So we head back to the hotel. And then we leave and we go to Washington and we go and see the sights. But the craziest part about it was totally fucking empty. Totally, we were at the Lincoln Memorial. We were the only people there. And most of the time you see it, it's packed with people taking pictures, like tourists, sightseeing. No one. We were the only people. Granted, I think it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, but still. The thing that was so strange, I think, was having Baltimore, which was this really tremulous, crazy place, just like so close to the capital of the United States. Like, you know, the place where it all happens, Washington, D.C. They're like here. And I'm like, here is really struggling, and here you have the fucking president. Like, what kind of... in central London, obviously it's not like a dream, but like you think about like South Ken and all of these places, like it's affluent, and you've got this place like so close to the capital that's just in complete disrepair. I'm apologizing for any people who are from Baltimore that might be listening to this. You have a beautiful city. Yeah, and so we spent the day in Washington, and as we were leaving to go through Dulles Airport, we're in the smoking lounge. This guy comes in who's a Trump supporter, because we know he's a Trump supporter because it was the second thing he told us after Hillary Clinton's a lizard. I am a Trump supporter. And we were like, okay, nice. You know what? Really reasonable guy. And then like this kind of thing clicked in my head of like everything that we were seeing online, this over inundation of the polarization of the people in the United States, this massive split. Turns out most of the people really fucking normal. Like you to me, or me to anyone, or you to anyone. Like really reasonable. Just want to have a conversation about politics because the election just happened. It's not as polarized as you see online. It's deliberately polarized online. Circling back to the very beginning of the story, it's because if you're angry, you interact.
So, Sophie, that was quite an adventure. Would you go back to Baltimore?
In a heartbeat, in a second. But it existed in its bubble, in the time, in who I was. You know, I'm sure if I went back to Baltimore now, I'd have a really different experience of the place. But
Things are changing.
things are changing. You know, it's a different world for women out there. Not saying that it was bad at the time, but, you know, our progress has been, at least, I mean, talking from my very narrow perspective of being a white woman, our growth has been good. I think for other people and other nationalities, potentially less so. But, you know, it's hard for me to speak on because I don't have the perspective of that. You know. But I think that any growth is good growth, and hopefully one day it will include everyone.
Hopefully, one day this world will become a much safer place. Not only for me, but for you as well, and for all of us. And how's your art? Have you got any inspiration from this trip?
Stop making art, I think, was my inspiration. No. Yeah, I think so. I think for me and my practice in particular, and probably the person I went traveling with as well, both of our practice was impacted by it, in the sense that I think, I mean, she'd lived a much more rich life than I had up to that point. But for me, I'd always kind of been looking through a very small, thin, narrow tube and trying to create art, you know, with sort of blinkers on. And it was never good art, you know? And I'm not saying that the art that I created after that was any better, but I definitely felt like, or I feel like now when I look back at pieces I created then, I'm like, oh, I see how I was feeling, I see what I was going through, I see more depth and complexity than what I looked at on, or when I look back at what I brought to the interview on the very first day with like my shaking hands and my images, as he so kindly called them. So he definitely had a point. I still took it personal, and I'll take it personal to the grave. But he did have a point in the end. But I will say this, and that is, I think nowadays, at least from my experience, because that's all you can ever really talk from, I see a lot of people creating things and then kind of attaching a false narrative to it, attaching the narrative that they want that piece to have, or the emotions they want to convey from it, because they're like, otherwise it's not rich enough, it's not important enough, it doesn't speak enough. Like, if I staple something to a wall and I give you a really good reason as to why I'm doing it, then you're never gonna see it as valuable art. But I think they're lying to you. Like, that's not the reason they made it. Like,
You think?
Who knew? They made it because that's what they wanted to make, and it was a reflection on them. And even the description they put next to it, at that point, I know, like myself, they'll be looking back on it and being like, actually, I was doing this for X, Y, and Z, and that's none of the bullshit that was written on the piece of paper. The only thing that was true there was it was oil on canvas.
And what would be your key takeaway?
Travel with a friend.
Travel with a friend. Good
Travel
one.
with a friend who's much tougher and meaner than you.
Duly noted.
Not everything that you read, not every explanation is the true explanation. And to always dig a little deeper and to look back on information and try your best to learn from it. And then in terms of the traveling side of things, like sometimes when everything goes to shit, that's when the good shit's really about to start. One more for the people in the back.
Well, my dear friends. And today we had Sophie on Talk to Vlad. First of all, I would like to thank you for coming in here and being so brave to share this story. You know, it's not easy to talk about your personal experiences, especially like, you know, knowing that people will see that and people will judge that and people will think of it. I mean, you know, my audience is judge free.
You might be judging, but you're still watching, so...
I would like to thank you for coming here and sharing your experience about your fears, and I appreciate that, and I wish you to stay this way now and ever. And dear friends, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, share, and if you have any questions to Sophie, please drop your comments right below in the comment section or send an email to host@talktovlad.com, and I will see you next Friday. Smile.
It's about to get real.
Episode title? This is getting really funnier. What was the episode title actually?
White woman gets art judged.
Did I came up with it?
Yes.
White woman gets her art judged.
My feelings were really hurt. I blogged about it on Tumblr, and I felt a little bit better. You can't just do that shit.
I can.